And yet, if evolution is true, these molecules floating around at random would have to say to each other, hey, come on, fellas, we're not doing anything useful here. We're just floating around here at random. Now, let's get together. Let's start cooperating. Let's form some of these complicated metabolic systems and so forth and so on. And they'd have to separate from all that mixture and get together, make these complicated metabolic cycles. And then all these metabolic cycles would have to get organized and with a cell, have a membrane, and all that genetic material. You've got to have the genetic material, which organizes things and reproduces things and repairs things and all of that, you see. Is that going to happen by chance, by natural means on this earth? Never. It will never happen. And you know, some rather prominent scientists have agreed with this. We see a newspaper article that appeared in the London newspaper, the Daily Express, August 14th, 1981. The headlines tell us that two skeptical scientists put their heads together and reached an amazing conclusion. There must be a God. Well, that may not have been quite such an amazing conclusion to you and me, but it was to these two scientists because when they began their studies, they were both atheists. One of these scientists was Sir Fred Hoyle, famous British astronomer, one of the world's leading astronomers. And his friend, Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe, professor and chairman of the Department of Applied Mathematics and Astronomy, University College in Cardiff, Wales. Both prominent astronomers. They were both atheists when they began these studies. They became interested in the problem of the origin of life. First of all, they made certain assumptions about the absolute minimum to get life started. Then they assumed that every star in the entire universe had a planet like the Earth. Then they assumed that the universe was 20 billion years old. Then they calculated the probability of life evolving by chance, by some mechanistic, naturalistic, evolutionary process, somewhere in the universe, in that 20 billion years. Well, the answer was astounding. They could hardly believe it. When they got the answer, as far as the answer is concerned, forget about it. The probability was so low, it was essentially nil. As a matter of fact, Sir Fred has said the probability of evolution is equal to the probability that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard would assemble a Boeing 747. Well, I tell people, if you want to believe that, that's your business. But don't call it science and don't teach it to your students. Now, these two scientists had no inclination to believe in creation. They were atheists when they began their studies. Their total inclination, of course, was to believe in evolution. But because of these facts, the cold, hard facts of science, you see, these scientists have now concluded that a naturalistic, evolutionary origin of life anywhere in the universe is impossible. Therefore, they said, since life could not have created itself naturally, it had to be created supernaturally. Therefore, there must be a God. Now, today, neither one of these scientists believe in the Bible or believe in the book of Genesis. But they do believe that wherever life exists, it had to be created. Today, they are creationists. Did they become creationists because of their religion? Obviously not. You see, they became creationists in spite of their religion, because they were atheists when they began these studies. They concluded very logically, based upon the consideration of all the factors at work, that life had to be created. By the way, you see, the only thing they dealt with was the probability of getting things lined up in the right way. But what about the energy required to combine these amino acids? They didn't even consider that. What about the probability, once these molecules formed, that they would organize themselves into a living cell? They didn't even take that into consideration. You see, they only considered part of the problem, and based upon that consideration, they concluded that that could not have happened. You cannot get protein molecules. You cannot get DNA and RNA molecules by chance. Now, even if you had all of that, as I pointed out, you still couldn't get a living cell. So they only considered part of the problem, but they reached a conclusion that a naturalistic evolutionary origin of life is physically impossible. One of the laws of biology today is that life comes only from pre-existing life. You see, that has always been the law of biology, even from the very beginning. The notion that life evolved by some natural means is a 20th century myth that man has invented to explain his origin without God. But when we look at these hard facts of science, when we look at the laws of probability, when we look at the probability of these things combining or forming, first of all, and then combining in the right way, and forming this complicated thing that we call a living cell, we find that it's impossible, physically impossible. There's other factors I haven't even mentioned. You know, when amino acids are in the same solution with sugars, they react with one another, and they are mutually destroyed. You can't even have amino acids existing in the presence of sugar because they mutually destroy one another. And calcium forms insoluble salts with phosphoric acid. You have much more calcium in the crust of the earth than you have phosphoric acid. So all of the phosphoric acid would be down on the bottom of the ocean in the form of a rock. It wouldn't be available to make DNA and RNA, you see. And there's many of these other factors we have not even discussed. But after all, how many nails do you have to drive into a coffin to seal the coffin, you see? When we look at this evidence, we conclude that life could never have created itself naturally. And if it could not have created itself naturally, there's only one other possibility. It had to be created supernaturally. Oh, some say maybe life reached the earth from outer space. You haven't solved the problem. You've just transferred it to another planet, you see. There's nothing out there that we don't have here. We live in a universe, not a multiverse, you see. There's nothing out there that could make this possible. And so we conclude then that the origin of life, life that we have on this planet, came from the eternally existent, self-maintaining God. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth is still scientifically the best answer we have to the origin of life on our planet. Thank you very much.
Today, most evolutionists would admit that this idea that life could come from non-life is easily the most difficult portion of the whole evolutionary scenario. Evidently, life just could not arise here on Earth, and many evolutionists are saying the same thing that creationists have been saying all along. In fact, now they're saying that, well, life perhaps evolved somewhere else out in outer space, somewhere where the conditions are different, somewhere where perhaps even natural law is different, and then those spores of life came here on a meteorite. I'll tell you what, this is a great time to be a creationist.
John, it is a great time to be a creationist because we've got lots of tools available for people to find out this information for themselves. I know when it comes to chemistry, many people just want a layman's understanding of these particular arguments, and in this particular book called The Origin of Life, the essence of Dr. Gish's arguments are given here, but at an easy to understand level. But you know, one of our very special books is this one. The person who wrote it, Michael Denton, Dr. Michael Denton, he's not a creationist, he's not a Christian, but yet he wrote a book that just absolutely devastates evolution because he became very disenchanted with evolutionary theory. It's a very academic book, very technical, but it's a tremendous book to read to show that evolution has some big problems.
Actually, this is one of my favorite books. I recommend it wholeheartedly. I participate in a number of these creation-evolution debates, and believe it or not, before every debate, I read that book again. That's how important that book is to me. I'm telling you what, the resources are here, the tools are here, the evidence is here. This is a wonderful time to be a creationist, and we recommend these materials for the Christian home without apology.
These and other creation materials, including other programs in this Back to Genesis series, have been mightily used by God to answer questions, both biblical and scientific, to convince skeptics of the truth of creation, to train up children in the way they should go, to establish the importance of creation to the Christian faith. They can be ordered by calling toll-free 1-800-999-3777 or by writing the Institute for Creation Research, P.O. Box 2667, El Cajon, California, 92021.